Imagine, if you will, that your skeleton is not what you think it is.
Right.
Because usually, when we picture our bones, we think of this stack of heavy bricks.
Yeah, totally. Like a building.
Exactly. Think about it. Your feet support your legs, and your legs support your pelvis.
Right. And your spine stacks up like this precarious tower of blocks.
Yeah. And your skull just sits on top of the whole thing like a heavy bowling ball.
Right. It's a very architectural, gravity-bound way of looking at ourselves.
We just feel heavy. Like you stand in line at the grocery store, and you can literally feel the compression in your lower back.
Oh, absolutely. The grinding.
But what if I told you to completely discard that image? I mean, I want you to imagine your skeleton not as a stack of heavy, grinding bricks, but as a series of buoyant struts.
Buoyant struts. I love that visual.
Right. Imagine these struts floating, like completely suspended in a continuous pressurized web. They aren't resting on each other at all. They are just hovering.
It is a totally radical reimagining of the human body. Because when we operate under that stacking model, we inherently expect compression.
We just assume it's going to hurt eventually.
Right. We expect our joints to wear out like brake pads on a car. But the floating model you're describing, it shifts the paradigm entirely to suspension.
So it replaces the inevitability of gravity just crushing us.
The possibility of tension and balance actually supporting us, yes.
And today, our mission is to explore the hidden biological fabric that actually makes that suspension possible. It's a system called fascia.
Fascia, yeah.
We are doing a deep dive today into this fascinating source document called The Architecture of Buoyancy, Realigning the Fascial Web.
It's such an incredible blueprint.
It really is. But we aren't just going to look at what this tissue is under a microscope. We are going to explore how you can effectively reprogram this web during your nightly sleep cycle.
Which is the absolute best time to do it.
Right. We are talking about eliminating chronic pain, waking up without that terrible morning stiffness, and incredibly letting go of literal emotional baggage that gets trapped in your tissues.
Yeah, the emotional component is wild.
So whether you are desperately trying to fix a stiff lower back that screams at you every morning, or, you're just insanely curious about how to optimize your biology, this conversation is going to completely change how you view your own body.
I really think it will.
So let's unpack the physical material first. Before we can start hacking the sleep cycle to float like a buoyant vessel, what exactly is this biological fabric?
Well, to understand fascia, you kind of have to unlearn a lot of traditional anatomy.
Oh, really? How so?
Because for centuries, anatomists doing dissections, they just viewed fascia as this annoying packing material.
Like bubble wrap?
Yeah, bubble wrap that they had to cut away to see the quote-unquote important stuff like the muscles and the organs.
Right.
If you've ever prepped chicken breasts in the kitchen.
Oh, yeah, and you pull off that weird silvery film.
Exactly. That silvery translucent film covering the meat, you've handled fascia.
Wow. Okay.
But in the human body, it's not just a film. It is a continuous three-dimensional web of connective tissue. And it surrounds every single muscle fiber, every bone, every nerve, artery, and organ.
Wait, so it's not just a wrapper on the outside of a muscle? It goes, completely through it?
Uninterrupted. From the very top of your skull right down to the soles of your feet.
That is wild.
I mean, if you were to magically dissolve every other tissue in your body, the muscles, the bones, the organs, the blood.
Okay.
And you leave only the fascial web, you would still perfectly see your exact shape, right down to the structures of your internal organs and the features of your face.
So it's basically a ghost to me made of tissue.
Exactly. It's the scaffolding of your existence.
Yeah.
And the key to this whole deep dive is understanding that this fascia is highly responsive to hydration and physical tension.
Right. It's dynamic. It's not passive. And from what I understand from the source, we are targeting the sleep cycle specifically because sleep is when this fabric actually changes shape.
Yes. Because during your waking hours, you are functioning in a catabolic state.
Meaning breaking things down.
Right. You are breaking things down, expending cellular energy, and physically just fighting gravity to stand upright.
Exhausting.
But sleep shifts you into an anabolic state of repair. And that's primarily driven by the parasympathetic nervous system.
The rest and digest circuitry.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the body is saying, okay, the active work is done. Let's fix the damage.
That's the biological directive. So how does it actually fix it?
To enact those repairs, your body relies on these specialized cells called fibroblasts.
Fibroblasts. Okay.
Yeah, think of fibroblasts as microscopic spiders. And they travel through the intricate silk web of your fascia.
That's a cool visual.
Right. When they sense mechanical stress or injury, they actually spin new collagen soap to reinforce the web. During the day, they're mostly just patching emergencies. But during the deep sleep cycle, when the muscular system is finally offline, these fibroblasts do their heavy remodeling.
So if you want to change the structural shape of your body, you have to do it when the factory is actually open for renovations.
That is the perfect way to put it.
That makes perfect sense. So how do we prep the factory for these microscopic spiders? The source material outlines a pre-sleep routine, starting with what it calls hydraulic preparation.
Right, because fascia is mostly water.
Which is something I think people totally forget when they think about connective tissue. I mean, I just think of rubber bands.
Yeah, most people do. But the extracellular matrix of the fascia, the space between the actual collagen fibers, it's filled with this viscous fluid.
Viscous like syrup.
More like the consistency of raw egg whites. It's composed largely of hyaluronic acid and interstitial fluid.
Okay, egg whites. Got it.
During the day, gravity and your constant muscular contractions literally squeeze this fluid right out of certain weight-bearing areas.
You know, this reminds me of a kitchen sponge.
Oh, how so?
Well, when you use a sponge all day, squeezing it tightly to scrub dishes, it gets completely wrung out.
Right.
And if you leave that dry sponge on the counter overnight crumpled up, it hardens into this rigid, twisted shape.
Yes.
So if you go to sleep dehydrated, your fascial sponge kind of hardens into the stressed, hunched posture you held at your computer desk all day.
The sponge is a highly accurate mechanical parallel. Because when that interstitial fluid is depleted, the collagen fibers in the fascia lose their lubrication.
So they dry out.
They dry out and they physically rub against each other and become sticky. They develop these microadhesions.
Which are what exactly?
They're basically tiny abnormal bonds between layers of tissue that are supposed to glide smoothly over one another.
Ouch, that sounds like morning stiffness.
That is exactly what morning stiffness is. So the intervention here is incredibly simple. You drink a few sips of water mixed with a small amount of electrolytes about an hour before bed.
Just a few sips, right. Because, I mean, if I chug a massive glass of water, I'm just going to be waking up to use the bathroom at 3 a.m.
Right.
Which totally ruins the deep sleep cycle anyway.
Exactly. You don't want that. A few ounces is all it takes. But the electrolytes, the sodium, potassium, magnesium, they are the crucial mechanism here.
Why not just plain water?
Because without electrolytes, plain water often just flushes right through your renal system. Electrolytes carry an electrical charge that helps pull the water directly into the interstitial spaces of your tissues.
Oh, I see.
You are literally giving your fascial layers the fluid glide they need to slide back into their natural alignment during the night, rather than gluing together in a shortened, stressed state.
Okay, so we hydrate the sponge. But wait, what happens if I hydrate the sponge and then immediately curl up into a tight defensive ball under the covers?
Well,
doesn't that just squeeze the water right back out of the tissue?
It absolutely does.
Yeah.
Which introduces the next requirement from the text, which is strategic proprioceptive loading.
That sounds like an incredibly complex piece of physical therapy jargon.
It does, but functionally, we are literally just talking about how you deploy your pillows.
It's so funny that optimizing our biology comes down to pillows, but the mechanism behind it is entirely neurological, isn't it?
It is entirely about feeding the right data to your brain.
Yeah.
See, your subconscious mind monitors your body's position in three-dimensional space using specialized sensory nerve endings called mechanoreceptors.
Okay. And where are they?
They are heavily embedded all throughout the fascial web, and they constantly send telemetry data back to the brainstem.
So if I'm a side sleeper and I crunch my knees up to my chest and let my tuck shoulder kind of collapse inward all night, my brain is getting a continuous 8-hour stream of data saying, hey, we are in a tight defensive posture.
And the brain responds logically to that exact data. Because fascia fundamentally adapts to the tension placed upon it, your brain tells those fibroblast spiders, he has been in this shortened position for hours. This must be the new normal.
Oh, man. So they build the web to keep me stuck there.
Right. They reinforce this shape. The factory workers remodel your fascia to stay short, and you wake up feeling like you're trapped in a tight suit.
So strategic proprioceptive loading interrupts this data stream.
Exactly. By creating structural neutrality.
Meaning we use pillows to artificially prop the bones into a neutral sort of floating state so the brain gets a completely different message.
Precisely. If you sleep on your side, you place a firm pillow between your knees to keep your pelvis from twisting and collapsing.
Right, I've heard of that.
And you hug another pillow to your chest to keep your shoulders broad and neutral.
And what if I sleep on my back?
If you sleep on your back, you place a bolster under your knees.
The document actually specifically mentions that putting a bolster under your knees for back sleeping releases the psoas muscle.
It does.
Now, I know the psoas is a massive player in the fascial web, and we'll dive deep into it later, but why is this physical neutrality so critical for the subconscious?
Because it is the biological signal for safety. When your tissues are propped into slack, neutral positions, the brain receives telemetry, indicating that no joint is under threat of hyperextension or compression.
No threat, no defense.
Exactly. Because there is no threat, the nervous system stops sending those low-level electrical signals to your muscles to guard or protects the area.
Wow.
You are effectively speaking the language of the brainstem, telling it we are fully supported by the environment. It is finally safe to lengthen.
Okay, so we are hydrated, and we know how to set up the pillows for neutrality, but apparently, before we even climb into bed, there's a physical reset button we need to hit.
Yes.
The source calls it somatic shaking or pandiculation. This sounds a bit out there. What is pandiculation?
You have actually seen it 1,000 times. You just didn't have the clinical term for it.
Really?
Yeah. Watch a dog or a cat wake up from a nap. They don't just stand up and walk away.
Oh, they do that big stretch.
They perform a very specific, intense, yawning stretch. They arch their back, extend their front legs, tense every muscle vibratingly tight, and then very slowly, deliberately release that tension.
Yeah.
That is pandiculation.
Wait, how is that different from me just bending over and nudging my toes to stretch my hamstrings before bed?
Because stretching is entirely passive. When you touch your toes, you are mechanically pulling the ends of a muscle apart.
Right.
But your muscles are controlled by the nervous system. If the brain is still sending a contraction signal to that hamstring, passive stretching just engages the stretch reflex.
So the muscle fights back?
Exactly, making the muscle fight back. Pandiculation, on the other hand, is an active neurological reset.
So I have to flex it first?
Yes. You voluntarily contract the muscle tighter than its current resting state, and then actively, consciously command it to slowly release.
Why does the brain need us to voluntarily tighten it first? That seems backward.
To regain control of the baseline tension, which we call tonus.
Tonus, okay.
When you experience psychological or physical stress during the day, your muscles maintain a low-level background hum of tension, like a car idling too high.
Yeah, I feel that in my neck all the time.
Right. And if you just lay down in bed, that hum continues. By performing a pandicular stretch, or even just gently shaking out your limbs for 2 minutes, you are overriding that automatic background hum with a conscious signal.
Okay.
You are resetting the gamma motor neurons, which act as the internal thermostats for muscle tension.
It's like restarting a frozen computer.
Yes.
You are intentionally clearing the cache of your nervous system so it doesn't run stressful background applications all night long.
That is a highly accurate, functional description. And the final piece of this pre-sleep foundation involves the chemical and environmental state of the room itself.
Right, magnesium and cool temperatures. The text mentions topical magnesium spray. Why magnesium specifically?
At a cellular level, calcium is the mineral responsible for muscle contraction, and magnesium is the mineral responsible for relaxation.
Oh, I didn't know they worked in pairs like that.
They do. When a muscle fiber contracts, calcium floods in. To release the contraction, magnesium must pump the calcium back out.
So if you don't have enough,
you stay tight. Many people are deficient in magnesium, meaning their tissues literally lack the chemical key required to unlock physical tension.
But why spray it on the skin? Why not just swallow a pill?
Applying it topically bypasses the digestive system and delivers it directly to the local tissues that need it most.
Ah, got it. And the cool room temperature. I always thought heat was better for relaxing muscles, like getting in a hot tub.
Heat provides acute, temporary relaxation, yes. But a slightly cooler ambient temperature during sleep, around 65 degrees Fahrenheit, actually drops your core body temperature.
And why do we want that?
This drop is the biological trigger that initiates deep, slow-wave sleep. It also reduces systemic inflammation, which is a primary driver of the fascia becoming sticky and glued down in the first place.
Okay, let me summarize this because it's shifting my entire perspective.
Go for it.
We aren't just putting on pajamas and hoping for a good night's rest. Every single action here, the targeted hydration, propping the joints into neutrality, the yawning pandiculation, the cool air, the magnesium, we are actively engineering the environment to force the nervous system into a specific state.
You're meticulously controlling the variables so that the neurological signals your brain sends overnight say repair, lengthen and float, rather than guard, tighten, and defend.
Repair, lengthen, and float. I love that. And that word float brings us to the core paradigm shift of this entire concept. We've prepped the physical factory. Now we have to address the blueprint the factory is using.
Yes.
So you have to talk about biotensegrity.
This is where the standard mechanical view of human anatomy completely falls apart.
Right.
And where the true elegance of our biology is revealed.
Biotensegrity, the word is like a mashup of biology and tension and integrity. The source document says, the bones don't stack. They act as struts in a suspension bridge floating in the fascial web. Now, I have to be honest. When I first read this, my brain completely rejected it.
It's a tough concept to swallow at first.
Right. Because we are so conditioned by those plastic skeletons hanging in high school science classrooms, the ones wired together with metal rings.
Of course.
We intrinsically believe our bones are heavy structural pillars resting on top of each other.
It is a massive cognitive leap because we project the rules of human architecture onto biology.
Right.
If you build a brick house, it relies entirely on continuous compression. The roof pushes down on the walls push down on the foundation, and gravity holds the whole thing together.
Makes sense.
But your body is not a house. If your structural integrity relied on compression, the immense compounding weight of your upper body and head would crush the lower lumbar vertebrae and the meniscus cartilage in your knees to powder within a decade.
Which, unfortunately, is exactly how a lot of people feel their bodies are behaving. They feel that bone-on-bone grinding.
Because they have lost their tensegrity. They're forcing their bodies to rely on compression. In a healthy, optimized biological system, the bones act as rigid spacers.
Spacers?
Yes. They push outward against the continuous inward pull of the elastic fascial web.
The document uses a bicycle wheel analogy, which really helped me visualize it.
It is the perfect mechanical demonstration of tensegrity. Look at a wire-spoke bicycle wheel. The heavy hub in the center isn't resting its weight on the few spokes directly beneath it.
Right, if it did, they would just snap.
Exactly. Those thin wires would instantly buckle. Instead, the hub is suspended in midair by the continuous tension of all the spokes pulling outward toward the rim equally.
Wow.
Your bones are that hub. They are suspended by the omnipresent tension of your fascial web.
Oh, okay. I want to clarify something so we don't lose anyone in the visualization. The bones don't literally drift around loosely inside of us like boats unmoored in a lake.
I know. No, not at all.
They are held in a highly precise dynamic balance. I like to picture it like a snag in a tightly knit sweater.
Oh, expand on that.
Well, if you have a perfectly woven sweater, the tension is equal everywhere. But if you pull a single thread near the bottom hem on the left side, the collar of the sweater might warp and pull downward on the right side.
Yes.
The thread doesn't break, but the tension of the whole system is distorted.
That is an exceptionally accurate translation of fascial pathology.
Oh, good.
The bones don't drift aimlessly. They are locked in a precise suspension. But if your fascial web becomes dehydrated and sticky in your right hip, your snag in the sweater, it pulls the tension of the entire continuous web off center.
And what does the brain do?
Because your brain's primary goal is to keep your eyes level with the horizon, it will automatically force your left shoulder to drop to compensate, and your neck will crane forward.
So it's a chain reaction.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Suddenly, your bones are pulled out of their optimal floating alignment, and you start experiencing that crushing compression.
So the million-dollar question is, how do we use the sleep cycle to fix the snag and restore the optimal float? The source text details several fascinating modalities that bridge our neurology and our physical structure. And the first one is Yoga Nidra, which translates to yogic sleep, or what neuroscientists now call non-sleep deep rest.
Yoga Nidra is profoundly effective because it directly addresses the mental map your brain utilizes to hold your body together.
How does it work?
When you engage in a guided Yoga Nidra practice as you lay in bed, you don't move a single muscle. You simply systematically sweep your conscious awareness through every joint and tissue in your body.
So I just mentally focus my right thumb, then my right wrist, then my elbow. I'm just visiting them with my mind.
Yes.
But how does that physically untangle the snag in the sweater?
It reverses a condition known as sensory motor amnesia.
What's that?
When a specific area of your fascial web is chronically tight and compressed for months or years, the pain and tension signals become overwhelming white noise.
Oh, so you just get used to it.
Sort of. To cope, the brain eventually just tunes that area out. It stops perceiving it entirely. It becomes a dark, blank spot on your internal neurological map.
Wow.
By intentionally safely bringing conscious awareness back to these points during Yoga Nidra, you are illuminating the map.
You are forcing the brain to look at the dark room.
Exactly. You reestablish the neural pathway. The nervous system realizes, oh, I am still actively clenching this hip, but there is no actual physical threat present.
So it finally lets go.
Yes. This cognitive realization allows the motor cortex to finally drop the chronic tension signal, allowing the bones to drift back to their neutral, floating center as you fall asleep.
It's essentially updating the software so the hardware stops glitching.
You perfectly said that.
That makes sense. Now, we've also touched on the second modality, somatic pandiculation, doing those active stretches to reset the gamma motor neurons before bed.
Right.
But the third modality completely caught me off guard, mouth taping.
I know, it sounds like an internet fad or a bizarre hazing ritual.
Right.
But mouth taping is currently a massive movement in respiratory and fascial health, and it is rooted in hardcore anatomy.
Okay, explain.
It is the simple act of placing a small piece of porous surgical tape over your lips at night to ensure you breathe exclusively through your nose.
But how on earth does taping my lips shut relate to my skeleton floating in a web of connective tissue? It seems so disconnected.
It all comes down to a single, massive piece of anatomy, the diaphragm.
Okay.
The diaphragm is the undisputed king of the fascial web. It is a massive parachute-like dome of muscle and fascia that sits under your lungs.
Right, for breathing.
Yes, but its connective tissue roots extend deep into your lumbar spine and blend directly into the psoas muscles.
Oh, wow. I didn't know it went that deep.
When you breathe through your nose, the physiological resistance of the nasal passages forces the diaphragm to fully engage, descend, and act as a pressurized hydraulic pump for your entire core.
And what happens if the tape isn't there and my jaw just drops open while I sleep?
Mouth breathing is inherently shallow and dysregulated. It largely bypasses the deep engagement of the diaphragm.
So how are you getting air?
To pull air in through the mouth, the body recruits secondary respiratory muscles in the neck, the upper chest, and the shoulders muscles, like the scales and the sternocleidomastoid.
Wait, those are the muscles that are always screaming in pain after a long day at the computer?
Exactly. Because they were never designed to be primary breathing muscles.
Right.
If you mouth breathe for 8 hours a night, you are subjecting your neck and chest fascia to thousands of unnatural microcontractions.
That sounds awful.
This fascia becomes incredibly thick, tight, and anchored. You are literally pulling your floating skeletal structure out of alignment from the top down.
Good grief.
Taping your mouth forces nasal breathing, which keeps the diaphragm driving the breath, maintaining the perfect internal pressure to keep the spine elongated and suspended.
That is wild. Taping your mouth keeps your spine floating because it forces the diaphragm to act as the central anchor of the tensegrity system.
That's exactly it.
Okay, the fourth modality mentioned is a bit more high-tech. It's PEMF therapy, pulsed electromagnetic field therapy.
Yes, this involves laying on a passive mat under your bed sheets that emits low-frequency electromagnetic waves.
It sounds a little sci-fi.
It does, but to understand why this isn't just pseudoscience, you have to look at the unique electrical properties of fascia. Fascia is highly piezoelectric.
Piezoelectric, meaning it generates an electric charge in response to physical pressure, right? Like how a quartz crystal in a watch generates a pulse when it's squeezed.
That is the exact mechanism. When you walk, run, or stretch, the mechanical stress on your fascial web creates a tiny electrical current.
Okay.
The fibroblast spiders we discussed earlier don't have eyes. They navigate the web by reading these electrical currents.
Oh, so the current tells them where to go.
Yes, the current tells them exactly where the structural integrity is compromised and where they need to build more collagen.
So how does the PEMF mat factor into this at night when I'm lying perfectly still?
When you are asleep, you aren't moving, so you aren't generating those piezoelectric cues.
Right.
PEMF mats artificially emit electromagnetic frequencies that mimic the natural, healthy electrical pulses of human movement.
Oh, that is clever.
You are passively bathing your tissues in the electrical signals of structural repair while you sleep. You are directing the fibroblasts to remodel the web without having to lift a finger.
Okay, so bringing this all together, we have the tape, the hydration, the understanding of the web. The source material provides a very specific biotensegrity body scan to perform in your mind right as you transition into sleep.
It's a wonderful practice.
Walk us through the physical sensations of this, because it sounds like a profound way to fall asleep.
The scan is a deliberate process of overriding the heavy brick software with floating suspension software.
Okay, where do we start?
You begin at the foundation, focusing on the anchor points, the feet, and the pelvis. Traditionally, when you get into bed, You focus on how heavy and exhausted your hips feel sinking into the mattress.
Right, just sinking in.
But in the scan, you visualize your pelvis as three large, hollow buoys floating effortlessly on the surface of a calm tide. You consciously imagine the dense space inside the hip sockets widening and filling with fluid.
Notice you didn't say try to relax the hip muscle. You said visualize space and buoyancy.
Intention matters. Relaxation is the byproduct, not the action. Then you move your awareness up the central axis, the spine.
Most people feel their spine is a stiff, solid rod.
Exactly. I want you to visualize each of your vertebrae not as a block resting heavily on the one below it, but hovering a millimeter above it.
Hovering.
Picture them as a series of glowing pearls on a string of light. There is zero bone-on-bone contact. They were repelling each other slightly, like magnets with the same polarity.
I can actually feel my breathing change just imagining that space between the bones. And what about the upper body, the shoulders?
You move to the upper girdle. Anatomically, your shoulder blades, the scapulae, truly do float.
Really? They feel pretty bolted down.
They are embedded in a sea of muscle and fascia and only have one tiny, fragile, bony attachment point at the collarbone. But we hold them like they are bolted to our ribs.
So what's the visualization?
Visualize your shoulder blades as two flat, weightless leaves resting gently on the surface of a pond. Allow your ribs to expand outward horizontally like flexible rings.
The leaves on a pond image is incredibly soothing. And finally, the head.
The cranial float. Instead of a bowling ball compressing your neck, visualize your skull as a large helium balloon.
Oh, I like that.
The delicate cervical vertebrae of your neck aren't holding the skull up. They are merely the tether string keeping the balloon from drifting away into the sky.
Wow. If you can actually hold that visualization, the buoyant pelvis, the hovering pearls of the spine, the leaves on the pond, the helium balloon, your nervous system is going to operate on a completely different set of instructions than if you fall asleep worrying about how badly your neck hurts.
Absolutely. It changes the whole game.
But this raises a really important, somewhat darker question.
Where does the snag come from?
Yes. If a snag in the sweater is what pulls this beautiful floating structure out of alignment, what causes the snag in the first place, it can't just be that we sit in front of laptops too much.
No, it's not.
The source material points to something much deeper and more complex. Our emotional history.
We are crossing the bridge from pure biomechanics into somatic psychology here. If biotensegrity represents our ideal physical reality, then emotional armoring is the psychological reality that distorts it.
This brings us to a really fascinating part of the deep dive. The document introduces the work of Wilhelm Reich, who was a psychoanalyst and an early student of Sigmund Freud.
Yes, right.
He developed this concept called character armor. Walk us through what that actually means in the context of fascia.
Well, Reich broke away from traditional talk therapy because he observed something revolutionary. He noticed that when patients recalled severe emotional trauma, stress, or repressed anger, their physical bodies responded predictably. They would hold their breath, their shoulders would hike up, their jaws would clench, their bellies would harden. Reich hypothesized that chronic emotional repression doesn't just live in the abstract mind.
Right.
It is physically walled off in the biology.
So the body literally creates a physical shield.
Yes. If a child grows up in a volatile environment where it is unsafe to express anger, they learn to physically swallow that anger.
It has to go somewhere.
Exactly. Over years, the fascia around the jaw, the throat, and the upper chest physically densifies and hardens to keep that emotional expression locked down. That rigid physical hardening is what Reich called character armor.
So a chronically tight sunken chest might not just be a symptom of weak back muscles. It could literally be the fascial web creating a permanent cage around the heart to protect it from vulnerability.
Exactly.
The body becomes a physical ledger of our emotional history. So if the armor is made of physical tissue, how do we use the subconscious landscape of sleep to take the armor off? The text outlines several ways psychotherapy bridges into nocturnal healing, starting with sleep hypnosis.
The challenge with taking off character armor while you are awake is that your conscious mind, the ego, built the armor to protect you.
Right, it thinks it's helping.
It will fight to keep it. When you are awake, your critical faculty is actively running a script. My back hurts, I'm stressed, the world is unsafe.
So hypnosis shuts that down.
Sleep hypnosis, which usually involves listening to specific audio scripts as you drift through the stages of sleep, bypasses that critical firewall.
Because the conscious mind is basically asleep at the wheel.
Exactly. Hypnosis plants somatic visualizations directly into the fertile ground of the subconscious.
Okay.
Instead of trying to reason with the tension, The script gives a direct, authoritative order to the autonomic nervous system. Direct the fluid of your fascia to bathe and soften the areas of restriction. It rewrites the operating code while the ego is offline.
That's brilliant. Then there is EMDR, eye movement, desensitization, and reprocessing. Now, this is a therapy usually done wide awake in a clinician's office, but the document links it directly to the sleep cycle.
It does, because EMDR is fundamentally reverse-engineered from the sleep cycle.
Wait, really?
Yes. During EMDR, a patient holds a traumatic memory in their mind, while simultaneously tracking the therapist's fingers moving rapidly back and forth with their eyes.
Okay.
These bilateral eye movements mimic the exact neurological mechanism of REM sleep rapid eye movement.
Oh, REM sleep is when the brain processes and digests the emotional events of the day, right?
Correct. REM sleep categorizes memories, stripping the visceral, panic-inducing emotional charge away from the narrative memory.
So it takes the sting out of the memory.
Exactly. People with severe PTSD often have interrupted REM sleep, meaning the trauma never gets digested.
Oh, that makes sense.
By artificially inducing this REM-like state during the day with EMDR, you process the trauma.
Yeah.
Once that glitch in the system is resolved, the brain no longer feels the need to aggressively armor the body at night. The fascial web can finally stand down from high alert.
Wow. Okay, this next methodology genuinely sounds like science fiction to me. It's targeted memory reactivation, or TMR. How does this work?
TMR is on the absolute cutting edge of sleep science and classical conditioning.
Okay.
In a clinical setting, a therapist will help a patient achieve a state of profound physical release and emotional safety, perhaps through deep somatic experiencing or massage.
Right.
At the exact moment the patient feels that profound release, the therapist introduces a specific, novel sensory cue, a unique low-frequency humming sound, or the distinct scent of jasmine or lavender.
You are pairing the physical release of the character armor with a scent. It's like Pavlov's dog, but for fascia.
Then the patient goes home and goes to sleep. While they are in deep, slow-wave sleep, a device in their room releases that exact same scent of lavender or plays that exact same hum.
That is incredible. The conscious mind is completely asleep, but the subconscious smells the lavender and says, oh, I know what this means. This is the trigger to release the psoas muscle and drop the shoulders.
Yes.
You are literally hacking the sleep cycle to force the tissue to release.
You are triggering a massive systemic fascial release using associative memory. The brain automatically runs the relaxation software paired with the cue.
Just from a smell. The fourth modality is even more internal, lucid dreaming.
Right.
Becoming consciously aware that you are inside a dream while you are dreaming.
Yes, advanced practitioners of lucid dreaming can consciously command their dream body to heal or release tension.
But why does this affect physical fascia in the real world?
Because functional MRI scans show that when you perform an action in a vivid dream, the neural firing patterns in your motor cortex are almost indistinguishable from performing that action in waking reality.
Stop. So if I lucidly dream that I am physically reaching into my own chest and untying a massive knot in my heart fascia,
Yes.
my actual brain is firing the signals of release down my actual spinal cord.
Your nervous system responds to the vividly imagined reality of the dream, dropping its muscular tonus in the physical world.
That is mind-blowing.
Yeah,
But let's bring it back down to earth for a minute.
fair enough.
Not everyone can afford a TMR scent release machine or, easily induce a lucid dream tonight. The source document provides 3 very specific Reichian pre-sleep visualizations that target what it calls the hypnagogic state. Let's talk about that state first. What is the hypnagogic window?
The hypnagogic state is that transient, twilight magical window between wakefulness and sleep.
You aren't fully awake, but you haven't lost consciousness yet.
Right. Neurologically, your brain waves are slowing down from the rapid analytical beta waves into alpha and then into theta waves.
And theta is the sweet spot.
In the theta state, the rigid gatekeeper between your conscious control and your vast subconscious machinery swings wide open. It is the most highly programmable state of the human mind.
So this twilight window is when we want to plant the visualizations to melt the armor. Let's look at the visualizations the document provides. The first is the ice to water to gas transition.
That's a classic.
I tried reading this, but honestly, it sounded almost like a magic spell. How does visualizing ice melting actually do anything to physical muscle tissue?
It works because it leverages the physical properties of fascia we discussed earlier. Recall that fascia is thixotropic.
Right. Thixotropic, meaning it becomes more fluid and pliable when it is exposed to heat or kinetic energy, and more solid when it is cold or stagnant.
Precisely. The visualization asks you to imagine your chronically tight body as solid, rigid, crystalline ice. As you breathe slowly, you imagine a deep warmth radiating from your core, melting the ice into clear, flowing water.
Okay.
And as you drift closer to sleep, you imagine that water evaporating into a weightless, expansive mist or gas.
Okay, but how does the thought of mist affect the actual tissue?
Because your brain cannot hold two contradictory states of reality simultaneously.
Oh.
If your profound singular focus in the theta state is the sensation of expanding weightless mist, your motor cortex cannot simultaneously maintain a rigid, highly contracted, armored electrical signal to your muscles.
So they clash.
The intense visualization of expansion biologically overrides the subconscious habit of contraction.
The second visualization is the tensegrity string release. You visualize your skeleton suspended in the dark by thousands of glowing silk threads.
Yes.
You mentally scan the web for tangles, maybe a massive knot of dark thread in your jaw or deep in your pelvis. You visualize a warm golden light slowly untying those specific knots.
It's a very targeted approach.
The document notes something fascinating about this. It says this specific visualization can actually trigger myoclonic jerks.
Yes, those sudden, violent twitches or spasms you sometimes get right as you are falling asleep. The ones that make you feel like you are falling.
Oh, I hate those.
Yeah.
Why does it do that?
Clinically, a myoclonic jerk is the nervous system rapidly discharging pent-up electrical energy. When you successfully use the tensegrity string visualization to convince your subconscious to finally let go of a profound, armored snag in the fascial web, the energy holding that tension has to go somewhere.
Oh, wow.
The twitch is the instantaneous physical release of the emotional charge. It is a sign of success.
Well, that reframes that falling sensation entirely. I'm going to celebrate the twitch now.
You should.
And the third visualization is incredibly direct. It's called unzipping the suit.
This directly addresses Reich's concept of character armor. You imagine that you are lying in bed wearing a heavy, suffocating, tight rubber diving suit.
And this suit represents your defensive armor.
Yes. You visualize a slow mechanical zipper opening up all the way from the crown of your head, down your chest, past your navel.
Okay.
As the zipper opens, you feel the physical meat, the actual mass of your body, spilling out of the restriction and heavily expanding into the space of the room.
You are psychologically giving yourself permission to take the armor off. You are telling the nervous system, I do not need to be contained or protected from the world while I am alone in this bed.
Beautifully put.
But here's where I have to step in with some genuine skepticism. I think a lot of people listening right now might be hitting the exact same mental roadblock I did.
What is the roadblock?
If I am lying in bed, completely exhausted from a 10-hour workday, my kids are finally asleep, and I am actively trying to visualize unzipping a rubber suit, or untying glowing silk strings, or melting ice with my mind?
Yeah.
Doesn't that immense mental effort just create a new kind of tension?
Yeah.
Aren't I just working incredibly hard at relaxing?
That is a phenomenal insight, and it perfectly highlights the central paradox of all somatic and physiological work. You have hit the nail on the head.
So I'm not crazy.
Not at all.
Yeah.
If you try to relax, you will absolutely fail.
Okay, we need to completely unpack this paradox. How can trying to relax be the thing that prevents relaxation?
The paradox exists because conscious willpower is the very architect of the character armor in the first place.
Wait, say that again.
When you use your prefrontal cortex, your analytical, striving, get-things-done brain to aggressively command your muscles to relax, you aren't turning off the tension. You are simply employing a different, more sophisticated flavor of tension.
So I'm just stressing about relaxing.
Yes. Effort, by its very biological definition, is tension.
So if effort is tension and trying to relax is effort, how do we ever get out of the loop? The document introduces a somatic pioneer named Moshe Feldenkrais to answer this. Who was he and how does he solve the paradox?
Moshe Feldenkrais was a brilliant, fascinating figure. He was a physicist, a mechanical engineer, and one of the first European black belts in judo.
Quite the resume.
After suffering a severe knee injury that doctors said would permanently cripple him, he used his knowledge of physics and martial arts to completely rebuild his own neural pathways.
Oh, wow.
He developed a revolutionary method of somatic education based entirely on the principle of least effort. Feldenkrais realized that the human nervous system does not learn through brute force or intense effort. It learns through extremely fine sensory distinctions.
And this concept of sensory distinction is tied to a scientific law mentioned in the text, the Weber-Fechner law.
Yes, a foundational law in psychophysics. The Weber-Fechner law mathematically describes how we perceive changes in stimuli. Simply put, it states that the more work a system is doing, the less capable it is of perceiving small changes.
Give me a real-world example of that.
Imagine you are standing there holding a massive 100-pound backpack on your shoulders.
Okay, I'm dying.
Right. And if I secretly slip a 1-pound rock into your pocket, you will not feel the difference. Your system is overwhelmed by the massive effort of the 100 pounds. The 1 pound doesn't even register.
Right.
But if you are carrying absolutely nothing and I place that same 1-pound rock in your pocket, you feel it instantly. Your sensory acuity is maximized because your effort is minimized.
Okay, so how does the heavy backpack apply to me lying in bed trying to untie the fascial snags in my hip?
If you are using 50% of your available muscular and mental effort just to clench your jaw and try to visualize melting ice, you are carrying the 100-pound backpack.
So I'm blind to the subtle shifts.
Exactly. You cannot physically feel the microscopic 1% shifts in your fascial web toward relaxation. The ultimate flea tack, inspired by Feldenkrais, is to purposefully use 10% less effort than you think you need.
10% less effort.
When you do the floating bone visualization or the unzipping suit, do it lazily. Turn down the volume of your mental striving.
I love the idea of lazy visualizations.
By purposefully minimizing your effort, your nervous system becomes hypersensitive to the tiny microscopic snags in the fascia, allowing the subconscious to effortlessly release them.
Be profoundly lazy about your visualizations. I love that. And this leads to another Feldenkrais concept the text explores, the non-correction principle. This one feels incredibly counterintuitive to me. The text explicitly says, don't fix a heavy hip. Lean into it.
It is the absolute opposite of what we are taught. Normally, if we're lying in bed and we notice our right hip feels twisted, heavy, and uncomfortable, our immediate instinct is to physically shift around, adjust our posture, and use muscular effort to force the hip into what we think is the correct alignment.
Right. We try to fix the structural problem.
But the non-correction principle says, stop fighting the structure. Exaggerate the wrongness slightly in your mind.
Exaggerate the wrongness.
Yes. If the right hip feels heavy, mentally lean into the heaviness. Willingly accept the misalignment.
Why in the world would accepting a terrible twisted alignment help the body heal?
Because of the guarding reflex. When you constantly fight your own posture, your motor cortex assumes the current posture is a threat. It keeps the alarm bells ringing and the muscles tight.
Oh.
The moment you actively accept the misalignment and lean into it with your awareness, the brain realizes, oh, we are intentionally doing this and we aren't in danger. The alarm shuts off.
That is wild.
Paradoxically, the exact moment you stop trying to fix the heavy hip, the guarding muscles release and the inherent elasticity of the fascial web naturally floats the bone back to center on its own.
Wow. If you let go of the steering wheel, the alignment of the car naturally straightens itself out. This leads us directly to the core pathology we are trying to solve. The double effort trap.
The double effort trap is the true reason modern humans are so chronically exhausted.
Let's break it down.
Okay. Effort 1 is the snag in the sweater. It is the tight, dehydrated fascial web physically pulling your skeleton out of its neutral, floating alignment.
And effort 2.
Effort 2 is your muscular system constantly, endlessly contracting and fighting to compensate for that unbalanced pull so that you don't literally fall over or collapse in pain.
So you are engaged in a subconscious tug of war with yourself 24 hours a day. The source material has a brilliant, expansive analogy for this. The leaking boat versus the floating vessel. I really want to expand on this analogy to make sure you, the listener, grasp the totality of it, because understanding this changes everything about how you treat your body.
Walk us through the two vessels.
Okay, your current unoptimized state is the leaking boat. Your bones are acting like heavy, deadweight bricks. Your fascia, instead of being a continuous elastic web, has hardened into thick, rigid ropes that are desperately tying extra temporary buoys to the side of the boat just to keep it from sinking. And because the boat has a fundamental hole in its hull, representing that misaligned, off-center fascial tension pulling you down, you are constantly taking on water. To survive, you have a crew frantically bailing water out with buckets.
Yes, and that bailing crew is your muscular system.
Right. Working in absolute overdrive just to keep you upright against gravity.
A perfect representation of the double effort trap.
And here's the kicker. When you go to a physical therapist for a deep tissue massage or you do a really intense, painful hamstring stretching routine, all you are doing is emptying a massive bucket of water over the side.
You get temporary relief. The boat rides a little higher for a day.
But you haven't patched the fundamental hole in the hull. The water just rushes right back in. The reprogrammed state we are aiming for tonight, the floating vessel, is structurally different.
Describe the architecture of the floating vessel.
In the floating vessel, the bones themselves are the internal buoys. They aren't heavy, they provide the lift. The hull of the boat is completely sealed with the golden resin of your own somatic awareness. The boat stays afloat, effortlessly bobbing on the water, not because a crew is laboring and sweating to bail water, but simply by the brilliant tensegrity design of its structure. Stretching tight muscles is just bailing water. Reprogramming the neuroplastic blueprint patches the actual leak.
That is the essence of somatic healing.
But the mechanics of this are still mysterious to me. How exactly does this reprogramming happen while we are unconscious? How does a lazy visualization patch a physical hole in the boat?
Through a mechanism Feldenkrais called reflected movement, combined with the biology of REM sleep.
Okay, how does that work?
During your 10% effort body scan, you don't just picture the pelvis floating, you imagine it moving fractionally. You imagine your hip bone tilting by the width of a single human hair in a direction that feels incredibly fluid and easy.
An imagined microscopic movement. I don't actually fire the muscle.
Exactly. The brain learns and adapts entirely through contrast. When you imagine that effortless hair width movement, the subconscious suddenly receives a new piece of data.
It gets an update.
It realizes, wait a minute, I don't need to expand all this massive double effort to stabilize this joint. I can just let it float. That cognitive realization patches the leak.
Wow.
And because you are feeding the brain this realization right before you cross the threshold into sleep, your brain spends the next several REM cycles performing neuroplastic pruning.
Pruning the neural pathways.
Yes. It actively deletes the old, stressful, heavy brick neurological map and solidifies the synaptic connections of the new floating vessel map. You wake up physically changed because the software running the hardware has been rewritten.
So you wake up with the leak patched. That is profound. But moving from intellectually visualizing this to actually feeling it requires a significant shift in how we perceive our own internal reality. We are moving from the biomechanics of effort into the realm of inner body awareness. We have to bridge the physical machinery with what some might call spiritual presence.
To permanently seal the hull of the vessel without reverting to effort, we have to fundamentally transition from doing things to our body to simply sensing our body.
The document introduces Eckhart Tolle's concept of inner body awareness. Tolle is widely known as a spiritual teacher and author, but the text makes a brilliant grounding point. His spiritual concept is actually a well-documented biological function. It is interoception.
Interoception is your nervous system's innate ability to perceive the internal physiological state of your body.
Like what?
It is the sensory pathway that lets you feel your heartbeat, sense hunger, or feel the flutter of anxiety in your stomach. When Tolle asks his readers to close their eyes and feel the invisible aliveness or the subtle energy vibrating inside their hands or their chest, he isn't speaking in metaphors.
Really? It sounds like a metaphor.
Biologically, what you are feeling is the hum of your nervous system communicating with the highly conductive liquid crystal matrix of your fascial web.
But what happens when the communication line is dead? I know when I try to do these body scans, there are parts of my middle back that I simply cannot feel from the inside. It's just a numb, blank void.
Those numb areas are the direct result of dehydrated, glued-down fascia. It goes back to the sensory motor amnesia we discussed. The brain literally tuned that area out because the chronic tension signal was too exhausting to monitor.
So how do we fix the numbness if we aren't allowed to use effort to force it open?
You apply the non-correction principle through observation. You watch the numbness without judgment.
Watch it.
You bring a soft, highly diffuse awareness to the blank spot in your back. You don't try to stretch it, massage it, or will it to relax. Just the gentle act of shining the light of conscious interoception on that dark spot lowers the defensive tonus of the surrounding tissue.
Oh, because the brain sees it again.
Exactly. The brain registers the attention and realizes, oh, we are observing this area again, and nothing terrible is happening. There is no threat. The frozen fascia slowly begins to thaw, rehydrate, and regain sensation.
It's almost like the observer effect in quantum physics. Just the act of quietly observing the system fundamentally changes the state of the system. But, I mean, we can't spend our entire lives lying in a dark room observing our fascia. Eventually, we have to stand up, get out of bed, and face the crushing force of gravity.
True.
The text suggests taking this floating vessel practice out of bed using a Buddhist walking meditation, specifically a practice called kinhin.
Lying in bed is for downloading the programming. Walking is the ultimate stress test for integrating that programming.
Makes sense.
Walking upright is the most complex tensegrity puzzle your nervous system solves. Kinhin is a deeply ancient, very slow, highly deliberate walking practice utilized in Zen monasteries.
Why does it have to be slow? Usually when I walk, I'm leaning forward, rushing to get a coffee or catch a train.
When you move quickly, the kinetic momentum of your body completely masks your structural imbalances. You fall forward and you catch yourself over and over.
So momentum hides the flaws.
Right. Slowing the pace down to a crawl catches your internal bailing crew in the act. If your fascial web is misaligned, moving in ultra-slow motion will instantly cause you to wobble, shake, and lose balance.
So you feel the effort.
You will vividly feel exactly which tiny muscles in your feet and hips are desperately clutching and spasming to keep you from falling over.
The walking stress test has a specific biomechanical technique outlined. It's 3-point contact: lift, swing, touch. How do we apply biotensegrity to taking a single step?
As you slowly lift the back foot, you don't use heavy muscular effort. You employ the visual. The heavy leg bones are actually weightless buoys, effortlessly bobbing up within the fluid of the hip socket.
Okay, the buoy visual again.
As you swing the leg forward, you imagine it swinging freely like a heavy pendulum suspended on a delicate silk thread, utilizing momentum and least effort.
And touching down.
As you touch the ground with your heel, you don't aggressively stomp the earth. You allow the earth to rise up and meet the foot, accepting the ground's support.
And you combine this incredibly mindful stepping with the plumb line, imagining the crown of the head suspended like that helium balloon we talked about. It is genuinely fascinating that 1,000-year-old Zen walking meditation translates directly, biomechanically, to modern tensegrity hacks. Those monks were basically practicing advanced, applied fascial realignment.
They absolutely were. The ancients intimately understood that true spiritual clarity and mental stillness require absolute physical efficiency. You cannot meditate deeply if your bailing crew is screaming in panic trying to keep your skeleton upright.
But this brings up a very practical, structural question. When we are walking slowly, or even when we are lying down trying to balance these floating buoys, where is our true center? If we were a suspension bridge made of biology, what is the main pillar holding the whole web together?
To answer that, we have to distinguish between the conceptual mind, which is located in the head, and is always worrying about the boat sinking, and somatic reality. The answer to where our true center lies reveals a stunning, almost unbelievable overlap between modern biomechanics, neuroanatomy, and the ancient maps of human energy.
Let's dive deep into this geography. From a pure physics and biomechanical standpoint, where is the exact center of mass in the human body?
For the vast majority of human beings, the physical center of mass, the ballast, the heavy lead keel at the bottom of the boat that provides stability, is located deep in the pelvic bowl.
Where exactly?
Slightly behind the navel, just in front of the second sacral vertebra, which anatomists refer to as S2.
S2. So deep inside the lower pelvis, that is the physical anchor.
Yes. But a tensegrity structure also requires a counterpole. We have a center of buoyancy, the part of the vessel that naturally wants to rise, providing lift.
And where's that?
Somatically and structurally, that upward center is located in the chest, specifically around the heart and lungs at the site of the cardiac plexus. It acts as the sail or the hot air balloon.
The ballast is deep in the pelvis, the buoy is high in the chest. Now, the source document brings in the groundbreaking work of Dr. Candace Pert, a famous neuroscientist who wrote Molecules of Emotion.
A fantastic book.
The document relates her neuroanatomical research directly to a guru's map. It turns out that the major nerve plexuses, these dense bundles of nerves along the spine, perfectly anatomically align with the ancient chakra system. I had a massive aha moment reading this.
It is the ultimate bridge between the mystical traditions and hard biology. A nerve plexus is a complex intersecting hub of nerve fibers that govern the function of specific organs and massive sections of the fascial web.
And the locations line up flawlessly. The ancient root chakra at the base of the spine corresponds exactly to the coccygeal plexus. The sacral chakra, which ancient texts associate with the water element and fluidity, perfectly matches the sacral plexus located at S2. The heart chakra corresponds directly to the cardiac plexus.
That's exactly right. And connecting all these massive hubs of neurological information is the sympathetic trunk, a literal physical chain of nerve fibers running down both sides of the spinal column.
The sympathetic trunk.
If you look at it in a dissection, it literally looks like a string of pearls. This trunk is the main highway for your fight or flight response.
Right.
And at the very base of this system, terminating right around the S2 center of mass, the spinal cord frays out into a massive thick bundle of nerves called the cauda equina, which translates to horse's tail.
This biological geography completely explains why ancient martial arts and spiritual traditions focus so obsessively on the pelvis. The Japanese tradition calls this lower center the hara. Taoist internal alchemy calls it the lower dantian. The Vedic tradition calls it svadhisthana. They all independently identified the lower belly as the true center of human power, movement, and stability.
Yes, they mapped it thousands of years ago.
But look at us today. Modern humans are completely top-heavy. We live entirely in our heads.
We are a culture of floating heads disconnected from our bodies. Because we survive in the modern world by using our prefrontal cortex to solve abstract problems on screens, our bioelectrical energy and muscular tension constantly pull upward into the jaw, the neck, and the eyes.
Wow. Yeah.
We completely lose our neurological connection with the heavy ballast at S2. This is why asking a modern office worker to focus their awareness deep in their pelvis feels so alien, unusual, or even deeply uncomfortable.
I proposed an analogy for this when I was reading the source text. It's like treating the human spine as a massive fiber optic cable. The electrical signal needs to flow cleanly from the S2 ballast at the bottom all the way up to the helium balloon of the head. But the contacts, the nerve plexuses, are dirty, corroded, or jammed with muscular tension. To restore the tensegrity flow, we just need to clean the contacts.
That is a highly functional analogy. The text outlines a two-point fascial realignment to clean those contacts.
How do you do it?
You simply hold your inner body awareness simultaneously at two places: the sacral ballast at S2 and the heart buoy in the chest. By mentally establishing the two extreme poles of your tensegrity system, you allow the spine to decompress.
So just feeling both at once.
By consciously lowering your center of gravity down to S2, you automatically, mechanically allow the hiked-up shoulders to drop and the compressed heart to float upward. You don't have to forcefully correct your posture. It corrects itself through polar balance.
That sounds incredibly peaceful, but here is the massive elephant in the room. If S2 is our true center of mass, our natural anchor of stability, why is it so incredibly hard to feel? Why is the lower back and pelvic floor so heavily armored, tight, and painful in almost every single adult?
Because the S2 region is not just your mechanical center of gravity. It is the deep origin point for your most primal, ancient survival reflexes.
Which brings us to the darkest, most intense part of the document. The coiled snake and the nervous system's emergency brakes. We are talking about the survival lock. The document deconstructs the ancient, highly mystical concept of Kundalini. Usually when you hear about Kundalini, it is described as this mystical, sleeping servant of spiritual energy resting at the base of the spine, waiting to be awakened.
Right.
But the text strips away the mysticism and frames it as a profound physical fascial lock, a dense coil in the deep connective tissue of the pelvic floor, right between the first and second chakras.
When you look at the deep anatomy of the pelvis, framing it as a coiled snake makes perfect mechanical sense. The S2 area is the precise anchor point for the deepest, most important muscle in the human body.
Yes.
The psoas.
The psoas,
Yes.
also known in some somatic circles as the muscle of the soul.
Yes. The psoas is massive. It attaches directly to the lumbar spine, crosses down to the deep pelvic bowl, and attaches to the top of the femur, the thigh bone. It is the only muscle that directly connects the spine to legs.
So it's central to everything we do.
More importantly, it is the physical engine of the mammalian fight-or-flight response.
Yeah.
If a predator attacks and you need to sprint away, the psoas violently fires to lift your legs.
Okay.
If the predator overpowers you and you need to coil into a tight fetal ball to protect your soft vital organs, the psoas fires to violently pull your knees to your chest. It is the ultimate survival muscle, and it is buried deep at the exact S2 center.
So the coiled snake isn't a mystical metaphor. It is essentially the stored, unreleased kinetic tension of our survival reflexes, literally locked into the fascial web of the pelvic floor.
Yes.
And the document explores exactly how these survival responses lock the web down. It mentions polyvagal theory and the concept of the freeze state.
Polyvagal theory, pioneered by Dr. Stephen Porges, suggests that the vagus nerve, the massive wandering nerve that connects the brain to the gut, has a primitive dorsal branch responsible for a primal shutdown or freeze response.
Like playing dead.
Exactly.
Yeah.
When a biological threat is so overwhelming that you can neither fight nor flee, the dorsal vagus nerve triggers tonic immobility. You play dead.
The fascia basically shrink wraps the internal organs to protect them from bleeding out. The tissue becomes densified, cold, and numb. Now wait, hold on.
What is it?
This lizard brain freeze response sounds great in theory, but haven't evolutionary biologists recently debunked this whole old vagus versus new vagus mapping? I've read that the anatomical history of the vagus nerve doesn't cleanly split into reptile and mammal branches like the theory claims.
That is an incredibly important piece of scientific skepticism, and you are correct. The neat evolutionary story of polyvagal theory, the idea of a cleanly separated hierarchical old and new vagus nerve, is currently facing heavy criticism from neuroanatomists.
Okay, so the theory is flawed.
They suggest the freeze response is actually a highly complex, messy traffic jam of coactivation involving both the sympathetic and parasympathetic systems simultaneously, rather than a single reptilian wire.
Right.
However, and this is the vital distinction, while the evolutionary narrative of the theory might be flawed, the somatic reality of the freeze response is undeniable.
Meaning the map might be wrong, but the territory is real.
Exactly. The physical densification of the tissue, the profound numbness, the sensation of the fascial web completely locking down and shrinking around the spine, that physical phenomenon happens in trauma survivors every day.
The freeze is real, even if the nerve pathway isn't what we thought it was.
And that deeply locked tissue must be physically thawed, regardless of what we name the specific nerve pathways that caused it.
Okay, so the freeze lock is a very real physical phenomenon. What about the active states? Fight or flight?
That involves what is called the vagal brake. In a state of social safety, the myelinated branches of your vagus nerve act like a brake pedal on your heart's pacemaker, keeping your heart rate slow and calm.
Okay.
In a moment of fight or flight, the brainstem instantly lifts the vagal brake. Your heart rate violently spikes, digestion immediately halts, and the deep core fascia surrounding the psoas radically tightens to prepare the body for physical impact.
Wow. And then there's the startle reflex, which the document notes is governed entirely by the primitive brainstem. That is, that instant high-speed flinch when a door slams loudly behind you. It's a massive involuntary flexor contraction. Your shoulders hike up, your neck shortens, your eyes squint.
Yes.
The tragedy is, if you live in a state of chronic modern stress, constantly checking emails, watching the news, worrying about finances, that startle reflex never fully turns off. It leaves your shoulders permanently hiked up around your ears in a microflinch.
And this ties into the deepest, most complex layer of the armor, epigenetics.
Epigenetics, how does that fit in?
The coiled snake at the base of your spine, that locked psoas tension, might not even be the result of your own personal stress. The burgeoning field of epigenetics shows that severe trauma can alter the way genes are expressed in subsequent generations.
Wait, really?
Yes, you might be carrying the inherited ancestral survival stress of your grandparents. Chronic psychological stress, whether yours or inherited, creates a neurological dimmer switch that gets stuck halfway up.
So the alarm is always ringing.
Your nervous system operates under the delusion that the predator is always just outside the cave door, continuously forcing the fibroblast spiders to build a permanent, rigid suit of character armor out of your fascia.
We literally physically build our bodies out of our fear. It's tragic, but also a testament to how incredibly adaptive the human organism is. It wants to keep us safe at all costs. So we know what the armor is made of. We know it lives largely in that S2 Piso's coil. We know it is there because of deeply rooted survival reflexes. The ultimate practical question for the listener is, how do we finally uncoil the snake tonight?
We have to move from theory to application. We must provide the nervous system with the exact mechanical and environmental cues it needs to safely stand down.
Let's get extremely practical. The first rule the text gives for uncoiling the lock is remembering that fascia is a continuous holistic web. It uses the silk suit analogy.
If you are wearing a very tight one-piece suit made of delicate silk, and the fabric is bunched up and tangled tightly around your right hip, you will actually feel the pulling tension up in your left shoulder.
Because it's all one piece.
If you aggressively grab the silk at the hip and yank on it to free it, you will just tear the fabric. You cannot force the central S2 coil to budge by aggressively, painfully stretching your hip flexors.
So no intense lunges before bed.
Exactly. If you use force, the brainstem will perceive it as an attack and guard the area even more fiercely. To release the center, you must first soften the perimeter.
Soften the edges so the center feels safe enough to let go. You start by relaxing the jaw, softening the muscles around the eyes, unclenching the toes. And when that deep center finally does feel safe enough to let go, the document talks about spontaneous release. It mentions ancient yogic kriyas or modern neurogenic tremors, like those utilized in TRE tension and trauma-releasing exercises.
It is vital to differentiate between conscious shaking and spontaneous discharging.
Hmm.
Conscious shaking is when your ego decides, I am going to wiggle my leg now.
Right.
Spontaneous release is entirely autonomic. When the primitive brainstem finally registers absolute safety and releases that deep, ancient fascial lock in the psoas, the body will often naturally, involuntarily tremble, vibrate, or shake.
Really? Like a shiver.
Like a tremor. This is the nervous system literally burning off and discharging the massive amounts of stored kinetic survival energy. It is the physical act of unfreezing. You see animals do it in the wild all the time after escaping a predator.
Ancient practices approached this uncoiling through intense esoteric methods. Things like Mula Bandha, the root lock in yoga, or the Taoist microcosmic orbit visualization, moving energy up the spine. But the source gives us a brilliant, highly accessible, modern, uncoiling pre-sleep protocol. It is a pure biomechanical hack designed to simulate profound safety. I want us to fluidly walk through this protocol so you, the listener, have a clear, actionable routine to try the exact moment you get into bed tonight.
Let's outline the sequence. It is designed to be completely effortless.
Step 1 is the unload. Tonight, when you get into bed, the first thing you want to do is take gravity completely out of the equation. You lie flat on your back, and you throw your calves up onto a stack of pillows or a chair or the edge of the couch. You want your knees bent at a 90-degree angle and your hips at a 90-degree angle. This specific geometry physically neutralizes gravity and puts the massive psoas muscle into a state of complete, absolute slack.
You are mechanically removing the tension from the coiled snake. Step 2 is hydraulic breathing. While you are in that unloaded position, place your hands lightly on your lower floating ribs.
Okay.
Instead of breathing up into your chest, inhale deeply down into your lower back, physically trying to expand the tissue and push your lower back horizontally against the mattress.
You are using the internal air pressure of your lungs to stretch the massive thoracolumbar fascia of your lower back from the inside out rather than pulling on it from the outside.
Precisely. Step 3 is the shear. While you are breathing into the lower back, you introduce microscopic movement. You perform incredibly small, ultra-slow pelvic tilts.
Just a tiny rock?
You are rocking your pelvis back and forth by maybe half an inch. This tiny, effortless friction breaks these sticky hyaluronic acid adhesions between the fascial layers, restoring the glide.
And the final step, step 4, is the vagal pump. You stop moving the pelvis and lie perfectly still. Keeping your eyes closed, you slowly trace a large circle with your eyeballs in their sockets. As your eyes move in a slow circle, you visualize your tailbone deep in your pelvis, drawing the exact same synchronized circle.
This is a phenomenal neurological hack. The connective tissue surrounding your brain and spinal cord is called the dura mater. It attaches firmly at the base of the skull, and it anchors all the way down at the tailbone.
Right.
By moving the eyes, which gently tugs on the suboccipital muscles at the base of the skull, while simultaneously visualizing the movement of the tailbone, you are gently flossing the entire dural tube. You are sending a wave of relaxation down the entire central axis of the nervous system.
It is a beautiful sequence because it demands zero striving, zero pain, and zero effort. You are simply providing the exact, precise mechanical and neurological cues the brainstem requires to confirm the all clear. You are using your inner body awareness to gently invite the inherited locked-in stress to finally thaw, rather than going to war with your own body.
You are treating the biological organism with profound respect, yielding to its design rather than fighting its mechanics.
And that profound shift in perspective brings us to the end of our deep dive. We've journeyed all the way from treating our bones like stacking grinding bricks to visualizing them as floating, buoyant struts. We've navigated the double effort trap of the leaking boat, we've patched the hull with the golden resin of somatic awareness, and we've learned how to finally, safely uncoil the snake of our ancient survival reflexes.
We have provided the listener with a completely new architectural blueprint for their subconscious to utilize during the critical anabolic repair cycles of sleep.
I want to leave you, the listener, with a final, provocative thought to mull over as you prepare your room, drink your electrolytes, and get into bed tonight. We've spent this entire time establishing that your physical posture, your daily stiffness, and your chronic joint pain are very often just a physical, fascial record of your nervous system's history, a long, heavy history of survival, startle, fear, and stress. If you use these tools to patch the leak, what happens tomorrow morning? What happens to your personality, your confidence, the way you speak, and your interactions with the world when you wake up in a body that genuinely, biologically believes the war is finally over? What kind of person do you become when your vessel is finally allowed to float?
That's the real journey.
It absolutely is. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the architecture of buoyancy. We hope you enjoy exploring your new floating vessel tonight. Sleep well.